Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee meeting for Thursday, March 16th at 1:30 p.m. There it is. We'll ask for a roll call, please. Mr. City Clerk.
Excellent. Councillor Carlson.
Present.
Councillor Palladino.
Present.
Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Here.
Councillor Campbell.
Present.
See, we have Councillor Middleton Hope has joined us in the chamber, as well as Councillor Crowson online. Thank you.
Thank you. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. All right. Moving to adoption of the agenda from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the agenda of the regular meeting of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee on March 16th, 2023 be adopted as presented. Councillor Palladino.
There are no further additions or deletions. I would move that we approve the agenda.
Are there any additions? There are none. There it is.
I'll call the
All in
question.
favor? Yo. Thank you. That is approved. Consent agenda from Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee held February 16th be approved, and the chair and city clerk designate be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that the status of initiatives from March 16th, 2023 be received as information. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any questions from my colleagues?
There are none.
Just one quick question we have is the date of return for one of our items, the indoor court multipurpose, the end of this month. I don't think we have another meeting before then, so will that be on our April agenda? I'm just guessing.
Clerk.
Just looking into that right now for you. If not, I would anticipate a report on that at a council meeting if that's not going to be the timeline.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing further, I'll call for the vote.
What's been called? All in favor? Passed. Moving on to presentations, history of 429 Squadron and the City of Lethbridge. Please come forward, Wayne King and Vince McGrath, if you could. Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. You're looking sharp.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vance McGrath. I'm the president of 702 Wing here in Lethbridge. This is Wayne King, one of the executives of 702 Wing and former CEO of 429 Squadron. So we're here on behalf to make a presentation to the city on the 75th anniversary of the city adopting 429 Squadron.
Fantastic. Just a reminder, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Members of council, as you're well aware, the city of Lethbridge adopted 429 Squadron in 1944. 429 Squadron was formed initially in November of 1942 and served almost all its wartime service with No. 6 Bombing Group stationed in northern England. During that time, the squadron participated in all activities of Bomber Command, principally dropping bombs, of course, but also mines in various harbors and so on that were then in the hands of the enemy. I believe that given that the city of Lethbridge adopted 429, I took the opportunity to obtain a copy of a chronicle or a history of 429 Squadron from the author and had him sign it to the city of Lethbridge. The chronicle comes in 2 volumes. On the front is the motto of 429 Squadron, which is nothing to chance. And the author of these documents took several years to compile all of the information about 429 Squadron. It is a complete history of the wartime history of 429 Squadron. And I would certainly present this to the city as a memento of 429 Squadron and hope that a suitable place of display might be found within the city. And to that end, then I would present this to the city on behalf of 702 Wing of the RCAF Association. And that completes the presentation.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. That, did you want to just present it up here? Is that? Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. We'll find an appropriate place for that, I'm sure. We can pass it on to a city clerk to find someone. Do we have any questions for our esteemed gentleman here?
Sorry, I changed seats because I've never sat over
Councillor Carlson.
here. I saw an empty seat on this side. I've always sat on the far left side. I moved to the dark side as Councillor. Exactly. I'm moving further to the right as I get older, apparently. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this. I appreciate this. I'm sure we'll treasure it. My question is actually to maybe the city clerk. I'm not sure if you would even know. We do have a small display space. I know that we oftentimes get donations like this. When my father passed away, I brought a lot of his historical books down, but I never know what we do with them. Is there a place, is there a repository, or is there a better place that we could ensure that not just council and administration staff on the second floor have access, but citizens perhaps, or?
You're correct. There's an art display box or a cabinet that was recently installed up on the second floor there at the top of the stairs. The public is welcome to come up and access that at any time. There are numerous artifacts or donations that have been provided to the city that are in there, with additional pieces coming in the near future. As for other items or other processes, I'd have to probably revert to working with some colleagues internally to get an appropriate answer on where, how, or why things are in there.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And again, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yep.
My just a historical note. My father-in-law was flew a bomber in World War II over England. Oh, they're leaving. Okay. That's no, that's very good. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for coming in. All right, I have a resolution from Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee thank Wayne King and Vance McGrath for their presentation. Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, and we certainly thank the gentlemen for their presentation and for their gift, and we will make sure that these are placed in an appropriate location and treated with the respect that is due. If there are no further comments or questions from my colleagues, I will call for the vote.
I see none. Question's been called. Oh, all in favor? Good. Thank you. Coming up next, we have a resolution from Councillor Carlson on the 2022 Galt Museum and Archives Annual Report. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council receive this report as information. I know that Mr. Martins is here. Do we have any questions on behalf of the members of this committee that would like to bring forward to Mr. Martins? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Just in case, I know that members of the committee have already received this and read through it. Just a quick question, if you want, was there anything that you wanted to highlight while you have the opportunity?
Bow ties.
Through the chair, yes, there are some highlights, and I would like to ask our vice chair of the Galt Museum to tell you about it.
That's who you are now. Okay. Please state, just give your name for the record, please.
Okay, Oki, good day, members of the Social and Cultural SPC. My name is Gerald Hebert. I'm the Vice Chair of the Galt Museum and Archive in Fort Whoopop Board of Directors. So I'm here on behalf of our chairperson, Devin Smith, who unfortunately could not attend this afternoon. And with me, of course, is Darren Martins, our CEO. And I've got a couple of other board members, Dennis Fitzpatrick and Avis DeKelver, supporting us from behind. I take great pleasure in sharing with you today the 2022 annual report of the Galt Museum and Archives in Fort Whoopop. So 2022 was a year of reimagining our organization. This includes transitioning to new ways of sharing with you, sharing new ways of serving with our diverse community, bringing our new strategic plan to fruition and continuing to be a space for community sharing and gathering. So now I'd like to share a few highlights from 2022. First of all, we engaged with over 200,000 clients, either in person or online, over the course of the year. And considering the size of our, rather smallish size of our institution, we feel that this is quite an achievement. Our volunteers contributed over $110,000 worth of their volunteer time. And we feel that this reflects on the quality of the work that our team provides to the community and the value that our volunteer team provides. So one interesting statistic is that an average of 39 individuals participated in each community program we offered. This is an important benchmark which reflects the take-up and the value of our programming in our community. Our annual giving campaign hit a new record of $20,000. This reflects the level of community support and will help the GALT improve its semi-permanent GALT exhibition. We launched a traveling exhibition program to places and organizations across southern Alberta that have been underserved with quality curatorial projects. This ongoing initiative is intended to strengthen our ties with the communities around us and build awareness and support in light of the history in these communities. And through our partnership with the Friends of the GALT Museum and Archives and an international collaboration between the Association of Canadian Archives and International Council of Archives, we were able to raise $10,000 to help the sovereign nation of Ukraine when it is time to rebuild their state archival service. So these are just a few of the many accomplishments that you can find in the pages of the annual report. The GALT lives its mission every day, striving to not only reflect the world around us, but also create spaces of belonging for everyone. As the heart of the Lethbridge community, we continue to be curious about our past, present, and future. We are friends, collaborators, industry leaders, and most importantly, storytellers and facilitators for the community. So at this time, Devin and I would like to thank my fellow board members for their ongoing and unwavering support for the organization, the management and staff team at the GALT, who make this engaging work look so effortless, and to you, members of the SPC and the Council, who have invested and continue to invest in this important enterprise, in the work that we do for and about our great community. By helping to tell the story of our past, we believe we are helping to secure the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. My quick question for whoever wants to answer it, just give me the sense of the good, the bad, and the ugly of COVID and coming out of COVID, and you know, some of the things that you learn, some of the things that you maybe that was a good thing that you learned from that, and then moving forward from that. Just yeah.
Through the chair. That is an excellent question. Some of the good things that happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we were able to access through the Government of Canada and the Museums Assistance Program some special COVID funding to do a significant amount of online initiatives and engage with our community through video as well as participatory programs online. That was probably the largest highlight and something that worked. The bad things, some of the bad things that resulted is that we've had a relatively, I would say, a good recovery, but not as quick as we would wanted for in-person visitation and program participation. So we still are lagging behind a little bit, but are hoping to sort of make up those numbers this year and into the future. So far, we're very pleased with the amount of visitation that we have had this year, and it is slowly and steadily increasing. We've also learned that we have to engage our communities not just in person, but also online. We have a significant online presence now, whether that is through our website at Fort Whoop-Up or through the Galt Museum website, and all the different programs and engagements that we provide through that. So we have individuals who are wanting both. They want to be able to come in and participate in hands-on activities, yet they still want to have access to things, whether they're in their own homes or from across the world.
Thank you for that. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for being here. I'm not sure who wants to answer this one, and I should actually know because I was on the board of directors for many years. You deaccessioned, I think, nearly 200 items this year, which could be exciting because I know space is always a challenge. But what is the process following a deaccession? Does the museum ever host a garage sale or because I know that every time I'm in the collection, there's tons of fascinating objects, and I just wonder what's done with those objects after they're deaccessioned.
Through the chair to Councillor Carlson, the Galt Museum and Archives follows a strict set of rules and regulations set out by the Canadian Museums Association related to deaccessioning. So part of that process is we do audits of our collection routinely to ensure that objects that are in the collection fit the mandate of the organization and largely for the City of Lethbridge. If there are objects that are deemed not to fit within that structure, then we contact the donors' families, and if there's no response from them to take these objects back, then we look at providing these objects to different institutions across the country. And sometimes, for example, if they're from, say, American, we will look to some American institutions as well. After we do a large community consultation process, informing people that this is the process that we're going on. So we're very public about what we do, how we're doing it, and the timeline. From determining something to be deaccessioned to the actual deaccessioning can take upwards of a year, sometimes longer. And as a last resort, what we will do is we will put those items up for auction. And those items that are auctioned off, the money that's raised through those items goes back into purchasing objects that are relevant to our mission and mandate.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any other questions? I see none. Back to the original motion from Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommends the City Council receive this report as information. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. Appreciate providing it to us and allowing us to ask a few questions, and we'll sure to share this with our colleagues. Unless there's anything further from my colleagues, I'll call for the vote.
Nothing further. Question's been called. All in favor? Thank you. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Get on that piano. All right. Next, we have a resolution from Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommend the City Council refer the proposed recommendations from the Social Service Integration Group, SSIG, as an attachment 1 to administration for consideration as part of the upcoming land use bylaw review. I know that Mr. Malcolm is here and we can be asked some questions. I know there's some people want to speak to this, but first off, I see Councillor Carlson. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't realize we had a presentation. I could wait till after, or this is basically about the administrative recommendation, so I could probably ask it now if that's all right.
Sure, ask it now. Yeah, and we'll have any public who wants to speak afterwards.
Thank you. Through you, probably to Mr. Malcolm, I'll assume. This recommendation is to forward this on to our land use bylaw review and update. I'm casting my mind back to the original SSIG recommendations, and many of them were land use, obviously, but some were not. Some were about better working relationships, acknowledging certain things, etc., if I recall, and I may not recall correctly. What's going to happen with those recommendations that aren't land use based? Will they still be discussed during the LUB review, or is there some other process that those could be examined?
Thank you for the question. So I think you're referring to 3, 4, 5, and 6 from their initial document. One of those was to complete a resident satisfaction survey on a regular basis. It is something that we do through the Ipsos reads, and so that's something that we felt was already being addressed, so we didn't specifically call that one out. The other ones had to do with relationships with either the province or the Blackfoot Confederacy, and those are certainly things that we will continue to do in our general or in our day-to-day work. Again, they were maybe a little bit outside of the scope of the purpose of the SSIG committee. Still, I think there's some validity to them, so we will certainly take them into consideration, but we did not feel they warranted a specific response. Unlike the ones that tied directly to the land use bylaw, we certainly think there's some things that we can explore through that process.
Okay, so thank you. So the land use bylaw review and an update will tackle the larger issues. The other ones will be ongoing through our regular work.
Yeah, I think so, and I think the folks from planning and design might be able to speak more to what they would include into their land use bylaw process, but certainly within the community social development area, the other recommendations will stay front of mind as we do our day-to-day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I wonder if we can just expand a little bit on what kind of the proposal of the, I'm calling it community care campus area, and that rezoning that was kind of recommended. Can we get a kind of an update as to where we're at with that? I know that it was one of the plans was part of a CIP project, I believe, correct? Am I speaking out of turn? I know we were looking at, or at least suggestions as to a community care campus area.
But to take a little bit of a crack at this, so when the SSIG group first brought forward and submitted their recommendations back in December of 2021, it included something specifically around a community care campus. At that time, council provided some different direction, and then in September of 2022, the SSIG resubmitted their recommendations, and there was direction for administration to bring back these recommendations. I don't have the date in front of me, but somewhere in between, council provided specific directions to undertake a community care campus study and provided some, I believe it was operational dollars, not capital dollars. And at this point in time, administration continues to look at that project and scope that project in relation to some subsequent directives that came through council related to finding a sober shelter site and a permanent shelter site. And so those things are being currently contemplated together under a bit of a more strategic approach so that we're not either working on competing projects or doing two projects of very similar scope and nature. So currently, we don't have anything definitively scoped, and it's a work in progress.
Great, thank you. Councillor Deputy Mayor, Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sort of just following up on that, that line of questioning, Mr. Malcolm, because there were recommendations in this report to look at an area plan for that core service area. So that's being considered outside of what the land use, that's being considered outside of what we're sending to be looked at for the land use bylaw, correct?
I will maybe defer to our folks in planning and design to speak specifically to that.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. So to Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, in attachment 2, planning and design did respond in terms of our recommendations. Undertaking an ARP for that area at this point we believe is premature. There is already an ARP in existence, and we first have to do our due diligence and work through that. So our department will not be undertaking an ARP there until after the land use bylaw review is done.
Okay, and I should have perhaps been more clear on that, in that they were looking for that development plan, but there was one in place. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we had everything sort of flowing.
It's one tool that we can use. We don't know if it's the right tool at
Okay.
this point. So.
Okay, and thank you very much for that. I should have been more clear on how I was asking that. Now, just sort of in further consideration of that, there are some sites that are recommended to be built. We're not recommending those be built at this time. We're specifically focusing on the land use bylaw component of this, correct? So we're not recommending sites be built or anything. It's just looking at that land use component.
That's correct. The purpose of the SSIG committee was to make recommendations on locating and integrating different types of uses. They provided a number of recommendations, primarily around site criteria, which is what the planning and design folks will look to go and contemplate as the land use bylaw. But today we are not talking about any sort of buildings or sites actually proceeding forward with a construction or location.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Palladino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know which one of you want to try to answer this, but when you implement this and send it off to a committee or to a group to work on a new land use bylaw, sometimes things come up during that process and they get stalled, and I don't want to see this die off we're working on a new land use bylaw as an excuse, because that could be 3 years from now, and I don't want things to be held up, when things come up. So I guess the question is, what is the city's position when things do come up during a redraft?
So, Councillor Palladino, we do have OBM on the books right now that planning and design look at social uses and report back in Q3 of this year. So our first phase of doing this project is actually engagement on social uses. So usually we wouldn't start with something like that, but in this case we are, because we have direction from City Council to report back. So we don't consider that the entire process will stall on this particular aspect.
On definitions and things like that?
That's correct, yes.
Good.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Ms. Gearing. I appreciate it. When we're talking about development, and I know that there's a process that is generally fairly lengthy, is there an opportunity there to accelerate if we identify a location that we want to move on fairly rapidly? Is there a process by which we can rapidly uptake and approve perhaps a change in usage of that property or a change in zoning? Is there an opportunity to do that, or do we have to go through a fairly lengthy process each and every time? And I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we cut corners. I'm just wondering if there is a way that we can short-circuit the time, not the process.
Well, that's an interesting question, Councillor Milton Hope. Definitely in terms of if the use is already allowed in the land use district, there may be things that can be done to speed things along. If we have to go through our rezoning process, we do like to stick to traditional timelines in that. There may be opportunities to shorten some things up in terms of advertising or public engagement or doing things concurrently, but you do have a process that needs to be followed, and there is some time involved. So,
I'm just thinking in terms of where we're going to be in a month from now or 2 months from now, where we may need to move fairly rapidly on a property. And I'm just wondering if there is a way that we can facilitate that. So it's good to hear that we are considering the options, and that although there is a process to follow, and I'm a process person too. At the end of the day, it is nice to hear that we can move through that fairly consistently and apply the necessary resources to ensure that it gets approved in a timely fashion.
So it is, there's two sides to that. So one is the city can look at things we can do for our process and in terms of resourcing, and also in terms of the applicant. So if an applicant comes to us and they're very well prepared, they have an engagement plan, they are ready to go, that certainly is helpful. Oftentimes that's sort of where things can take a little bit longer as well if you have somebody who is new to the process and doesn't understand. So there may be some opportunity to shorten things on both sides.
And we take the opportunity to mentor applicants through the process?
We do.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez wants to add in.
Yes, a couple of things there, and thanks, Maureen, for the answer. I just want to clarify a couple of things. Number one, in regards to the question that was just asked, the process we have in place involves different stages that include consultation, engagement, public hearings. So those are things that we want to stick to, like Mrs. Gehring explained a few minutes ago. But at the same time, we are looking at different stages. Phase one of the land use by law, like it was explained, is focusing on those social issues, and we're working hard in order to engage also with the community. There will be a phase and steps that are going to be completed within the next few weeks in order to start that first part of the work. But with that being said, if there is anything else that needs to be brought up in front of council, we will work through that process. And I know Mrs. Gehring's team have worked with other applicants in the past to guide them step by step. This is what you need to do, this is how you can do it, and the resources are there to explain that. The other thing that I want to mention is that today, we are focusing on the administration recommendations based on the SSIG. So there is an attachment to this item today. That's what we want to be recommended for administration to continue incorporate or exploring to incorporate those into the land use by law. That's phase two, but even some of those elements could be part of phase one if they are related to social housing or housing that is being completed as part of phase one.
If I might, Mr. Chair, just I recognize that we're going through a review and very likely a comprehensive rewrite. Are there components within the existing bylaw that create impediments to both us and to applicants? And those will, I see Ms. Gehring is nodding her head.
I'm going to start and then maybe invite Maureen if I'm missing anything here. I will say the existing land use by law it hasn't gone through a comprehensive review for the last 4 years. That's what we have been saying. Even though there have been amendments over the past few years, not a comprehensive that will look at the current situation. There are definitely opportunities here to do changes that will allow to streamline the process. And that's why we're going through the whole land use by law, and this is what we call it will be a complete rewrite where we're going to bring those ideas and things that could help to set the stage to move forward. And Maureen, I don't know if I missed anything else that you want.
Just in response to that as well, is there an opportunity, either Mr. Sanchez or Ms. Gehring, for the industry to be actively involved in the redesign, the redevelopment, the rewording, the recrafting of the bylaw or the process itself?
So in terms of industry, do you mean the building and development industry, or?
Those that make applications for amendments under the bylaw to acquire zoning or permits and so forth.
So we have quite a broad list of stakeholders right now. We're using our MDP stakeholder list. I think it's several pages long.
MDP stands for what?
Municipal Development Plan.
Oh, MDP.
MDP. Oh, not NDP. Sorry, MDP.
Thank you.
That's funny. And so we do have that stakeholder list, always able to add other parties to it, but we did a fairly inclusive effort with that. Just to speak a little bit further to changes for the land use bylaw, as we finish phase one and we do come back to council with recommendations for social uses, we may be in a position where we will be amending bylaw 6300 to get those in place before we actually have a complete new bylaw to give to you at the end of 3 years. So we recognize that. We are dealing, council has given us direction to look at this quickly, and so we may be in that position, just to give you a heads up, but that's what we're looking at, so.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much. So just either Ms. Gehring or Mr. Sanchez, you talked about on page 20 of the report, we talk about staff engaging with the community on a comprehensive review of all social service-related issues, and that you're working on that now over the next few weeks. What does that look like?
So we're in the process of preparing an RFP for an engagement consultant.
Okay, so that's where we're at right now. We haven't moved further to start pulling groups together or anything.
Haven't. We believe we'll be able in May, we should have our engagement consultant hired and have an idea of what the engagement will look like for phase 1. And so in May, we're targeting Civic Works to come back to give a bit of a highlight to City Council members and then to go on to Council with that. And then, of course, when we get our phase 2 engagement plan together, we will be back, as I mentioned, at a previous City or Civic Works meeting to have Council endorse the larger engagement strategy. So.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you very much. It's good to hear that that engagement strategy will be going on. Another question I had with regards to its attachment to page 23, planning response and recommendations overall. There's a comment about consider removing boarding house, group home, and potentially supportive housing from the list, understanding that we want to focus on use rather than regulating the user, which makes sense. How are we going to help the public understand when we have public hearings, when we have questions come forward? Because this is the language that the public is used to. How will we help them understand what we're talking about when we're talking about permanent supportive housing, when we're removing supportive housing from that list?
I think that's an interesting question, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. In terms of semantics about how things are named and called, oftentimes there can be sort of arbitrary history or meanings towards how we separate individual uses. And so I think we will have to have a component of the engagement strategy, and we've talked about this as staff, with a bit of a user guide afterwards. So in terms of this is what you might have looked for in the old bylaw, this is where you'll find it in the new bylaw, this is how things have transitioned. A companion document, yes. So we definitely do want the bylaw to be written in simple terms. So again, common language, not too much jargon, as planners are maybe apt to do. And so we do want to try to make it understandable for everybody.
And for that, for rewording some of these, like you said, plain language, so that everybody can understand. So the social services groups will be incorporated into that rewriting, so that we can make sure that they're all using the same language too throughout the community.
Yeah,
so
that is a bit of a challenge for sure.
But that's something too to make sure we're using the same language as they are, particularly because we will run into community misunderstanding of not understanding what something specifically means. So making sure that everybody's using the same language when they come back for rezoning, when they come back for any requests of council when it comes to land use.
Yeah, and it might be a case of deciding on common language between the groups, because there are certain things that subject matter experts use in terms of terminology that maybe in a land use bylaw aren't appropriate, but how do we marry the two and come up with a compromise everybody understands?
Thank you very much.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope you'll forgive me for going a little off topic here, but because Ms. Gehring is here, something has been sort of rattling in my brain, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to ask. Is there any way to do a rezoning today for future? So sometimes when we're trying to rezone an area, the pushback we get from community is that, I bought this and it was zoned single-family residential, and now you want to change it to a duplex or whatever, whatever it may be. Is there any way to do something today to say, fair warning, in 10 years, this is coming into effect?
So I think with any amount of planning or forethought, if there is an idea for a specific facility, a specific land use, you can certainly take a piece of vacant land or developed land and do a rezoning, with the understanding you don't have to apply for a development permit. So,
I get that, but-
developers do that today. They rezone land that they're not going to build on for 10 or 15 years, right?
I'm saying, so people have the certainty that 10 years from now, I'll use an example perhaps, the ice, the curling, civic center, curling center. If we zoned it today, to say 10 years from today, that is an appropriate spot for a shelter, for an art center, whatever it may be. But it cannot happen earlier. That's not possible, is it?
No, only if you're the landowner are you able to control that. So in regards to the civic center, sure, because the municipality is the landowner, we can do that. But no, once you rezone a property, those development rights are now valid. So any of the permitted or discretionary uses can be applied for as soon as you do the rezoning.
So
I'm not aware of any time lapse. I'm not sure if Councillor Palladino may be either, but I'm not aware of rezoning working that way.
No, I think you're right. I think that's the purpose of zoning in the first place, was you look at the document and you find residential and here's what I can do, and you look at commercial and here's what I can do. To put a blanket caveat on a bunch of land, I don't know if you can do that, unless you made it all future urban development. And that's, agriculture in the county, agriculture was the only permitted use on some land, right?
And I'm thinking, if you did own it, like, obviously you can't say, I'm taking your land and making it whatever, but if it's our land, just give certainty to the neighborhood that in 10 years, 15, 20, whatever it may be, that is going to be permitted there, so that people aren't saying, I was told from day one that this was always going to be a parkland or a...
So anytime you do a rezoning, neighbors are able to see what that land is going to be used for. The development that's allowed to occur within that zoning district may not happen today or tomorrow or in 10 years, but it is allowed. If you have something like a master plan that would show what types of uses are there, or an outline plan for a new neighborhood, even an area redevelopment plan, I don't know that you would have that content in the actual rezoning bylaw itself. And of course, the ability to say exactly in 10 years this is going to happen, that there's other mechanisms in terms of CIP funding, all sorts of different tools that you can use there. But I don't know that we would actually write that into a bylaw.
Okay.
Councilor Middleton Hope.
Just a question to my colleague. Are you talking about fair warning?
Exactly.
And as an example, I'm sure you're well aware, Ms. Gehring, in Calgary, we had all kinds of issues with the airport, developing communities around the airport, and they were provided fair warning that we're going to be extending runways in the future, and that could have a deleterious impact on you and your home and your property values. That didn't stop them from suing the city anyway. And that did occur. So as our airport continues to grow and expand, hopefully, at the end of the day, we can anticipate that there'll be those types of complaints about the change. It's a use that was designated to begin with, but the permitted use around it has changed or has increased. Yeah.
And again, Councillor Milton Hope, I think there are other tools that we can use besides actually writing that into the bylaw, so, to give fair warning.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions for anyone? I know we do have a scheduled speaker to speak on this resolution from Dennis Bremner, if you want to come forward, please. And just a reminder that you have a total of 5 minutes, if you can. Thank you.
If I sit down,
Yeah, I know you can't. Sorry. I'm kidding. Please do. I try to be tough, but fair. No, go ahead.
These questions are rhetorical. Do you value someone else's life and livelihood as you do your own? I do. I believe my life is not worth any more than yours or any less. I also respect people that generate their own income to provide for their family and the employees' families. I will, for the moment, assume you believe the same sort of thing. If I were to ask you how many people died of overdose in Alberta in 2022, and you and the nonprofits probably have that number. If I were to ask you how many building owners affected by addicts had their properties foreclosed, businesses lost, divorced because their finances were too burdensome, creating a broken family, how many of those people died? What about their employees? How many employees lost their homes because of addicts destroying the employer's business, because the Saving Lives lobby killed a business owner's livelihood? How many of these people died? So we know how many drug addicts overdosed and died, but we have no idea how many people that are good citizens have died as a result of the impact. We have 10 square blocks of downtown, perhaps a little more. How many addicts will it take to saturate Lethbridge so we have more addicts per square foot than Vancouver? Have you pondered that? I have. You may be saying, well, what did you do? Glad you ask. Well, I spent months of going through the formalities of gaining the trust of elders, weeks more explaining day in, day out how my plan was advantageous to the mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and grandparents of addicts, days and days of talking to addicts to get their input, days walking around Lethbridge talking to business owners, losses of thousands of dollars I do not have just to try to give you a viable second option to consider. I arranged for at least 2 groups of financiers who were ready to build the facility, and it was not going to cost this city or the province a cent to have it built. You were given a plan that has been discussed with and supported by 12 elders of the Blackfoot and numerous grassroots people, some of which intend on running against the present chief and council in the next election. You were given a plan that completely fixed the damage the SSIG plan is about to inflict. And what was done with it, as far as I can see, absolutely nothing. So if you vote in favor of the SSIG plan today, you will be one step closer to killing Lethbridge business livelihoods and permanently destroying a society that has been built over decades, saving lives, killing livelihoods. I was asked to attend an SSIG meeting in February 22. They were absolutely disgusted that I had stated in the local paper that they and the CSD staff were only developing a plan for downtown. They feigned disgust and took shots at me for misrepresenting them. I was characterized as being the lowest among the low. How dare I besmirch God's army? I was lectured on how well they all loved Lethbridge. How dare I? The co-chairs demanded a retraction and public apology. I told them as soon as they studied one other location, I gave my word I would put in that retraction. You will note, as of today, no apology is forthcoming or required. I then took it upon myself to question a varying number of business owners and residents within 1,000 meters of Burnside. Not one had ever talked to anyone who said they were a member of the SSIG, nor did they know what or who Social Services Integration Group was, nor did they know there was a formal plan to kill their neighborhood. The nonprofits also did not care. Their only Indigenous member insisted it should not be downtown, and all his comments were disregarded unless it fit their conflicted plan. Anyone that objected to their plan was overruled. Because this is following to a T the Phoenix, Arizona approach, let me tell you what you are being asked to do here. A group of non-tax-paying nonprofits want our downtown to serve a group of non-tax-paying addicts, and I'm not referring to the homeless. I define the two quite separately. They are totally unconcerned how many taxpayers are going to be permanently damaged. The nonprofit will then acquire prime real estate on the cheap and convert it to mini churches or services. So I am clear, they want you to give them the keys to our downtown at the cost of residents, businesses, and our society. The result of this contrived fiasco is what you are planning on voting on today, or at least introducing. I have 3 questions that I would like to have answered. Question 1, whom decided my submission should not see the light of day or even have the residents and businesses be aware it existed so they could decide as to what they would prefer? Question 2, why has my submission not been given the same consideration by this city that the conflicted nonprofits group in the CSD has been given? Question 3, why, when the CSSPC became aware that the SIG only studied one site, were they not shut down and their conclusions completely disregarded? As a person that obviously wanted an inordinate amount of time, or wasted an inordinate amount of time, money, and the time of trust of Indigenous elders that I now admire, and as a taxpayer who thought he was helping his city have more than one plan to debate, I would like a comprehensive and complete answer to these questions in writing, please, for 2 reasons. I want something clear and complete enough that a lawyer can understand why you choose to debate a single plan that you already know or you should have known will kill our downtown businesses, their livelihoods, and the livelihoods of their employees. And when this fiasco you are building in our downtown goes terribly wrong, and I promise you it will, I can hold up your paper showing the residents and businesses I cared enough to offer you a second option, but you chose not to disclose, debate, or even consider it. Any questions?
We have from Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. Through you to maybe our administration. In today's discussion, we're referring this to a land use bylaw discussion. We're not talking about specific sites at all, specific projects. This is basically just on referring it to. Can you maybe explain better what we're doing today?
Yeah, today, again, the purpose of the SSIG was to talk about site criteria for the location of different social services, of which they submitted a recommendation. Those recommendations will be going towards the land use bylaw. Now, there have been other kind of different pieces that have come out of the SSIG work. One was to investigate between the Park and Ride and the Civic Center for the use of a sober shelter, and administration went away and did that work. And then again, there was that direction to complete a community care campus business case, which is in a scoping process right now. So there's been no work or no investigation of a single site for that project at this point in time.
Thank you. And today is just about referring the criteria and citing solutions to land use, or to planning to work on as in our land use bylaw, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
May I?
Okay, go ahead.
Take a look at page 16 of 23, 6.2.1. And if you look at the direction that they want the administration to look at changing LUB, it's on. Yeah. Sorry. 16 of, I got 23. Oh, you probably haven't got my letter, which was on page 23. So if you take a look, you've got a number of drawings, all of them include, and the only drawings that are included are the Burnside 19 acres. And if you take a look at the administrative request at the bottom, it's to modify the LUB 3000 to accommodate changes to the bylaws or zoning within that particular area.
Malcolm, do you want to respond to that?
So a number of the recommendations from the SSIG talked about the potential around co-locating different things, and they called that the core service area. That's what that area shows, is to draw a lineage to what they were talking about. But in terms of further a plan to that space or anything like that. The only connection I can make is that it connects to the space that Ms. Gehring talked about around an area redevelopment plan, and as Ms. Gehring alluded to, that seems out of sequence at this point in time, and so the land use bylaw again is the focus.
Thank you. Thank you, Wynn. And again, that's what we're referring to today, is we're talking about reverting to the land use bylaw. So thank you, Mr. Bremner, for your time. Is there anyone else who wants to speak to us today? Step forward. Just for the record, give your name, if you could, please. Thank you very much.
Members of the Standing Policy Committee, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ted Schulten. I'm with Schulten Management in Lethbridge. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
And once again, you have 5 minutes. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So while I was a member of the SSIG, I want to make it clear I'm not here speaking in that capacity. The capacity I'm here today is as a property manager in the city of Lethbridge. And as I was reading through the materials presented in your agenda package, there was one clarification I was hoping to make for the benefit of the Standing Policy Committee. And thank you to administration for your presentation recommendations on these. So the one that I wanted to speak about was number 3, and it's and the criteria was priority social services must not occupy a parcel of land abutting any arterial roadway under the jurisdiction of the city of Lethbridge. And the comment that caught my attention, which I agree with, was the reasoning behind the action should be further explored during the land use bylaw review. In my role as a property manager, this is an important one to me, and I wanted to bring to your attention that in the submission from the SSIG, the very first paragraph addressed that particular one in the last line that said preserving high-volume commercial corridors for tax-generating complementary commercial uses conducive to business attraction, retention, and expansion. So in my role as a property manager, I spend a great deal of my time, over more years than I care to admit, attracting new businesses to Lethbridge. They also have criteria when they choose sites within the city of Lethbridge. And among those will be a listing or a laundry list of all the things that they feel would make their business successful. And Economic Development Lethbridge also has, I believe they call it 6 pillars towards business attraction, retention, and growth. Those are all near and dear to my heart. And so part of the background behind that criteria was twofold. If properties on busy arterial roadways are removed from the land inventory, they are no longer available for business attraction and retention and to try and attract some of these exciting retailers, businesses that every community wants. B, when they're removed, I might have said 1 or 2 or A or B, doesn't matter, 1 and B. When these sites, if these sites are rezoned for a social service use or some other use that is not business oriented, they are often removed from the tax roll. And some of these sites are among the most lucrative in our assessment base. And if enough of those are removed, we will also remove what is attracting to some of these retailers. And so I just wanted to make the point that in that criteria, the SSIG had discussed that in the perspective of economic development Lethbridge, and that is why they added that comment within the first paragraph of the recommendations. And that was all I wanted to bring to your attention about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for all the work you did with that committee as well. That was a lot. So appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for, is there anybody else who wants to speak here today? Anyone else? And for the third time, anyone? There is not. Are there any other questions from members of committee? So we'll go back to the resolution from Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Cultural and Social Standing Policy Committee recommend the City Council refer the proposed recommendations from the Social Services Integration Group, SSIG, as an attachment 2 to administration for consideration as part of the upcoming land use bylaw review. Acting Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much to everyone who came to speak, and thank you to the city staff for answering our questions with regards to this. As recommendations from the SSIG are largely related to our land use bylaw, and as we are currently undergoing that review, it seems appropriate at this time to examine those recommendations in this context. Those recommendations are going to come back to council for us to take a look at before any changes are actually made. I certainly appreciate that our staff will be engaging with the community on this. I'm happy to see specific mention of that with regards to social services related issues in the materials that we have as part of the package. And again, today, and I do appreciate Mr. Schulten's clarification with regards as well to removing from our tax base. Certainly that is something we need to be cognizant of when it does come to economic development within our community. Again, today is just referrals of the recommendations to be examined as we are going through the process of examining our land use bylaw and their specific recommendations from this one group. There are other groups that we have recommendations from that will also be included in there, as well as from city staff and as well as comments from council in the land use bylaw. So certainly there's going to be a lot of review with this and a lot of recommendations coming through from different organizations. So with that, as this is one component, I will ask for my colleagues' support on this.
We have Councillor Palladino.
We'll be supporting this motion. It allows for the greatest public engagement, and it also allows our planners to take a look at the city as a whole as opposed to just a whole or a certain area. So I will be supporting it.
Anyone else? That's it.
I will call for the vote.
All for the vote. All in favor? That passes. Thank you. And that is this meeting. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you. We are adjourned.